Hi, glad to have you back. The next chords we'll be learning are much more niche. Many of you will be able to get away with never using these chords. So if you feel like skipping this lesson for now, feel free. These are heavily used in jazz, blues, and other music that has its roots in those places. So when you hear these chords, they invoke a really strong reaction because they're used much more sparingly in mainstream music. Conceptually, they're the same as adds and suspensions, but they invoke a much different feel because they're actually chords stacked on top of other chords, which causes completely different functional purposes. Unfortunately, the cheats are a lot harder to do on the sevenths than other chords because the type of music that love these chords also love dropping in and out of keys and scales on the fly modulating. So the typical these notes are off limits doesn't apply. So unless the chords are native to the key, you'll have to learn quite a bit more music theory to truly master them. We'll start with the most common, which is the seventh chord. Again, it's not super complex on the piano. If you want a seventh chord, add the seventh note. Play first, third, fifth, and seventh. Where it gets complex is when you start getting into the major, dominant, minor, minor, major, major, minor, 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 seventh chords. Simply put, all of these have different distinctions. All those distinctions have to do with whether the interval between the fifth and the seventh note has 3 notes between it or 2 notes between it. So same as your first, whether your chord is major or minor, whether it has 3 or 2 notes. The major minor, which is almost always called the dominant 7 chord, is the most common 7th chord. This is the default when someone just writes G7. It's a major chord with a minor 7th on top, or 2 notes between the 5th and the 7th. It has a very distinct feel. It probably has the strongest feel that the song is about to end or resolve. If you learn only one 7th chord, that's the one to remember. Now the major 7 chord, typically notated as the note MAJ 7, so C major 7, has a major third on top, or 3 notes between the 5th and the 7th. Again, this has a very distinct feel. It's probably one of Billie Eilish's favorite chords, which is what gives her music such a distinct feel. When you have the 7th chord built off a minor chord, first, third, fifth, the same thing applies. You have a minor minor, you have a minor major, which just has that either 2 or 3 notes between the 5th and the 7th. You'll almost never see these chords unless you're playing jazz or blues. Now when you start getting into the 9ths and the 11ths and the 13ths, the beauty is we can cheat. In technical theory, these 3 chords are all built on the previous chord. They're built on each other. So a 9th is built on a 7th, so it's a 7th chord with a 9th added on top. And an 11th is a 9th chord with an 11th on top. And so on. So here's the beauty though. We don't have 7 fingers on one hand. So what does that mean? It means we can choose which notes to not play. And what do we know about the scale? Well, it starts repeating itself at the 8th note. So the 9th note is what? It's just the second, an octave higher. Or in other words, if I choose to not play the 7th, and I choose to play the 9th, an octave down, what do we have? That's right, just an add 2 chord. So while there are some fine musical distinctions that a true jazz musician is going to want to try and fill with all 10 fingers, for the average pianist, you can get away by just replacing a 9th chord with an add 2. And you can replace an 11th with a sus4. And you can replace a 13 with an add 6.